Thank you for arriving for day 2. We're aware that people sort of drift in after day 2, the traffic and everything else, so people are joining. I've got this session for the first 5 to 10 minutes where people will walk in, and hopefully everybody will be settled by the time we have the main act, which is absolutely fine. But I just thought I'd take a few minutes just to highlight some of the things that happened yesterday. I know we've got some people who've joined us just for today. But also, if I may, just sort of borrow a bit of your time just to talk a little bit about KEUK and build on some of the things we talked about yesterday. So I hope you really enjoyed the sessions yesterday with Nancy Rothwell and all the streams. Amanda's summary at the end of the day was brilliant in terms of encompassing all the themes that have been going on around business collaboration, around shared TTOs. David Coleman, without Helen, talking about place and collaboration and place. And I know that lots of you are keen to know whether there would be slides available and recordings, that kind of stuff, which we'll follow up on the app. One of the things we said yesterday was about the visible change. So this time last year, we were not under the name Knowledge Exchange UK, and we really hope that that's a visible sign of the evolution we're going through as an organisation to try and respond to what's happening in the sector, all the changes we talked about yesterday. And I think one of the things that we're really proud about is the diversity of members that we have. Membership is the heart of what we do, and we're really proud that we have a diverse ecosystem of members, from research and education institutions, from professional services organisations enabling knowledge exchange, from R&D companies and charities engaging in knowledge exchange, and also from the funders and supporters of knowledge exchange, who we'll hear from more this morning. And we're really proud to have that membership and really want to make the organisation work and the community work to get all of those perspectives together. We're also really proud that we cover the breadth of knowledge exchange. So commercialisation, collaboration, policy, place, student enterprise, and hopefully you'll see more of that with the special interest groups on KE Connect. And one of the things that's been a theme through the days is collaboration, and how in this day and age collaboration is absolutely key. And we also hope under the new brand you're seeing us collaborate. So hopefully in the last 6 months you've picked up that we've been doing joint events with Armour. To think about where research management and impact and innovation come together. We've been working with the IPO and UKRI to help consult around some of their schemes and guides so that they can be better fit for purpose and work for everybody. We've been working with the ESRC around social ventures and with the Russell Group University Alliance and 10U thinking about proof of concept and how the sector can benefit from that and where that fits. And hopefully also in the programme, you've seen lots of other organisations. I'm aware if you're new, this is the bit of the day where I just throw strings of letters at you, like UKSPA and NCUB and UIDP, all of whom are taking part and playing a role in the conference, along with many of our sponsors, you'll see in the exhibition centre, including Set Square and their Impact IP Toolkit, and representatives from KTP and others. Are all involved in this community thinking about how we can do knowledge exchange. And I just wanted to draw to your attention 2 partnerships that we're particularly proud of. One is with LifeArc. So we're in a training partnership with LifeArc, where we're working with them to support their fellows through mentoring, through some of our national courses, and also through their engagement with the conference. And we'd love to do more of that with other organisations. And the other thing I'm really proud to announce is an MOU we've signed this week with UPenn, around the University Policy Engagement Network. And watch out on social media for announcements about the next stages of UPenn's work later. So talk to Chris as well if you want to know more about that. So we're a membership organisation, and we have institutional membership, and those institutions are really, really important. But also we're a professional body, and it's not just about the organisations you represent, it's about you and your grey matter. And we really want you to engage with us, to help us to do the things that will help your life be easier and help impact happen more. And we've always done this. In fact, if I get the clicker, this slightly terrifying slide is of all our volunteers in various guises. So there are a load of knowledge exchange professionals who have helped to pull this conference together. And I'll say more at the end, thanking them, but they've done a lot of work to make this work and be relevant for you. This is the kind of thing in a best man speech where you always forget someone. So apologies to the unnamed person who hasn't made it to my list. We have the board who are volunteers from the sector. We have a professional standards working party thinking about skills framework and how we can professionalise skills in this space. We have the Concord Advisory Group. We have our course directors and trainers and our volunteers, all of whom are fundamental to make what we do relevant to the sector and to drive the sector forward. And so I'd encourage you that if you want to get involved, please do. There are a whole variety of ways of getting involved. KEUK Connect, the online community, is a really easy way to benefit and give, but there are all sorts of ways. Do talk to a member of staff. And equally, things like the Directors Forum that we have in a few months' time, which is for senior leaders in knowledge exchange, we'd really benefit from your input about what would be the best topics and what would be most relevant for that. And do look out for the KE Awards later in the year. We'll announce the call for applications and look out for more news about the Concordat and the skills framework that I've just mentioned. So we really want for you to help us know what's going to work for you best. So please do reach out, get in touch, and find a way that you can play a part. So that was my way of filling for a few minutes and allowing people to settle. You're all here not for me, you're all here for the next session, the plenary session. And I'm delighted to be able to invite up a team from UKRI, some of the constituent parts of UKRI. The way this session is going to work is we're going to have some presentations from colleagues from Research England and UKRI to start off with, and then we'll move into a fireside chat. I always find that a really weird concept, the idea of trying to make a relaxed environment when I'm standing in front of lights in front of 450 people sitting on a chair. So Simon and I will try and be relaxed in this setting. But we'll do a fireside chat with Simon Hepworth, if you haven't met or know, we'll explain a little bit more, but who's the new Director of Knowledge Exchange at Research England. I think it'd be really interesting to get his take and view on things. And then we'll have time for Q&A at the end as well. So that's the way it's going to work. I'm going to introduce up to the stage. I'm not quite sure who's going to do what when, so I'm going to introduce the team up to the stage, and they're going to introduce themselves and explain a little bit more.
So thank you very much, Stuart, for that. Lovely to be here. Thank you for inviting us. What a lovely day it was yesterday. Thank you to the team and all the people. Thanks also to everyone that I've got up with. So those people that I know. It would be really nice. People just come up to me and sort of said, "Hello, I'm so-and-so from so-and-so." It's been really some fantastic conversations throughout the day, so it was really lovely. So my name is Tony Sotirio. I'm Director of Commercialisation for UKRI. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about UKRI's sort of strategy and approach to KE, translation and commercialisation. So I'll bucket those three things together. I know they're not all exactly the same, but I'll bucket those three together as part of this conversation. My sort of background, so I've been 5 years now at UKRI, and this is when I show my age. I've spent sort of over 30 years working sort of at the interface between universities, publicly funded R&D and innovation and industry. So that's my sort of background, and 5 years at UKRI, which has been interesting, and hopefully we've made some progress. So to give a little bit of a high-level overview of where UKRI is and sort of direction of travel. I know you heard a little bit from Nancy yesterday about UKRI and the overall scheme. So this is what I'm going to sort of talk about today. So a little bit about our strategy, about where we are and the direction that's going. Touch a little bit on the spending review. I know, again, Nancy talked a little bit about that. Proof of concept funding and some work we're doing to overview our sort of overall offer for commercialisation. And a little bit about next round of impact acceleration accounts. So first of all, our strategy, and it will obviously, first I need to say is we are sort of in an organisation that will see change this year. We've got a new CEO starting, which we're all really excited about. So Ian is starting in August. Ottiline leaves at the end of this month in July. I think she's done a fantastic job with sort of thinking about how UKRI is developing as an organisation, our culture, and working much more as a cohesive organisation. So massive thanks to Ottiline. But I think we're all really excited with Ian joining. He will obviously bring his perspectives, and he's very much in listening mode at the moment, as CEOs are. And I think it'll be really interesting to see which direction we move in terms of as an organisation. So Ian starts in August. So this is our current strategy at the moment, and this is coming to an end. It's the first long-term strategy for UKRI, and it sort of shows the various pillars for UKRI. Our strategy. So we've got KE translation and commercialisation really throughout these different pillars, particularly within innovation, but of course people in careers, places, as we hear, is a key area for KE translation and commercialisation thinking. But of course, the ideas, generation of ideas, is the underpinning element for which, that helps to stimulate KE translation and commercialisation. So this is our current strategy framework. I'm sure with Ian coming in, the end of the strategy, we'll develop a new strategy, and there'll be lots of engagement with the community about the direction of travel. Obviously, one of my jobs is, I don't think it's not a difficult ask, is to make sure KE translation and commercialisation is featured very heavily in our new strategy. I don't think that's going to be a difficult ask, given the overall context, which I'll come on to in a second. So in terms of commercialisation, that's sort of our vision and ambition. I won't read it all out, I'm sure the slides can be shared. We will this year be thinking about, as part of that development strategy, what is UKRI's role in the various stages of KE translation and commercialisation, right from the early stages upstream to the later stages of that commercialisation, KE translation, and what's UKRI's role, where we are sort of direct funder, of course, but also what are our roles as sort of working with partners and as influencers in the overall ecosystem, and thinking about what our roles are for the various stages. This is our sort of framework at the moment. And it talks about, it says commercialisation, but it's very much relevant to KE translation and commercialisation. So we sort of think about our role and our strategy at the moment into three pillars. So on the left is sort of direct funding, in the middle, the support in the R&I system more broadly, and I think the third one is important for UKRI, but we do this together with the communities. How do we make the strongest case for the importance of KE translation and commercialisation? And what's the evidence base for that, and why is it important for the government to fund, and why is it important for the public to use public funding? So, spending review, this is a busy slide, it's a complicated slide, it's an oversimplification of the spending review process, and I won't take you through every step, and I know Nancy talked a little bit about this, so I won't bore you with it, but we're sort of where the arrow is. A couple of weeks' time, there will be an allocation to DSIT. Then there will be the whole period of actually deciding with DSIT how much UKRI will get, and then there's a whole process to decide how is that allocated within UKRI for the next 4 years, 3-4 years. So it is a complicated process, and I don't think spending reviews, people have been through them, I've been through a few now in my career. They're not a pure science, there's lots of last-minute conversations in corridors between ministers who decide on deals and that sort of thing, so you can do all the work that you need to do up front, but really until the Chancellor stands up, you never quite know what's going to be in the spending review, and there can be some surprise announcements. So obviously that's going to come up soon, and I won't repeat what Nancy said yesterday, what the overall mood music is, but we're trying our best to make sure that, say, KE translation and commercialisation is reflected. And I think it's really interesting, it's a key policy objective at the moment of this government, which is good, and that's a continuation. One thing about this area, even with the change of government, there hasn't been a downshift in the focus for KE translation and commercialisation. So I think that's really good. And as an indication of that, we had to package all UKRI's budget, 8.7 billion, into 12 lines. One of those lines was specifically on KE translation and commercialisation. So I think that's just an indication of the importance that Treasury, DSIT and UKRI put into this area. So take home one message, I think, is that UKRI are completely committed to KE translation and commercialisation going forward. And I think, and that's sort of underlined by that focus of one of the 12 lines being on this as an area. It has good and bad things, of course. You can't hide many things in that, if that's a line, but I think it's helpful overall. So I'll move on from strategy and spending review talk a little bit about proof of concept. I know a lot of you have been involved, so sort of first of all, sort of massive thanks to all of the teams that have been involved. I know it's a lot of work. Sorry, it's a lot of work, but hopefully it's a positive thing from your, within your organisation. So again, certainly a positive thing within UKRI and the government. So this is where we are at the moment. This is the timeline for the proof of concept. We really want to have feedback from organisations, and we really want to have feedback about what can we do differently next time to help, streamline the process. I guess I know it's a substantial amount of work, so I feel bad about the work, but I do think this is the right direction to travel. And everyone I've talked to so far, I found, most of them are telling me anyway, that they found the work helpful. Whether they tell each other that is a different thing. But something about the proof of concept has really hit the spot, and it's really interesting to find out what it is. Given that UKRI has substantial funding already in this sort of area, something about the proof of concept programme has sort of hit a sort of sweet spot. So I know you can't tell much about website views and whatever, but it was the second most read UKRI news item and the most viewed UKRI funding opportunity this year. So something about it has hit a spot, and this is when the numbers start getting a little bit frightening. It's worth to saying that there was a comment made yesterday, so just being clear, the first round is £9 million. The intention is to fund 40 million over the 5 years. That was the intention for this. Of course, we are seeing what spending review comes out with, and we can't commit to the next stage, the next round. But the intention is that this is an ongoing programme for the full 5 years. So you probably can't read about the numbers, but this is the intention to submit numbers that we got. Now, I wouldn't read too much into this because the numbers. It was purposely very brief intention to submit, and we know a lot of those applications were going to be speculative. But it just shows you, top box is how many applications, so you had a single council relevance area, the bottom is where people put more than one area. An interesting split, and slightly disappointing, I guess, that there wasn't more in some of the subjects, such as AHRC, SDFC, social sciences. So something to think about how do we pull those applications up. And on the right-hand side is just geographical split. But I think this doesn't really mean anything. What really is going to be really helpful is to understand from TTO offices and organisations, actually, what was the triage? You had X amount of applications. How many were actually, commercialisation applications or speculative R&D applications? How many were sort of potentially good applications? So really interesting to talk to you and find out. But good luck, people who are putting applications in. We're doing the assessments as we speak. So we've also been working with DSIT to do a sort of an assessment of our early stage commercialisation, and there's some sort of emerging findings from that. So it didn't really tell us tons that we didn't know, but I think it gives us a bit of incentive to think about how do we work together as UKRI to improve our offer. So some of the emerging findings, so obviously there is lots of evidence of impact for the schemes that we do have, although we know we have lots of schemes and it's quite complicated. Most are discipline specific, except for things of course such as HIVE and ICURE. Pros and cons for having discipline-specific schemes. Again, it would be useful to hear from people about, what's the balance, do we have the right balance? Most of our funding schemes in translation and KE can support commercialisation, but it's often an element within there. Maybe that's why the proof of concept has been so successful, because, it says it clearly on the tin. So think about branding. I think there's more we can do about branding and making it clear what our schemes fund. And then the last one, it's not necessarily a problem, but as we know, discipline spend is quite different across councils, and that's probably appropriate given the different nature, different need for commercialisation. But, again, is that difference actually justified in, an evidence-based? One of the things that we want to do, and we'd love you to feed in, so we've got a survey where one of the things that we know is that our website is a little bit complicated to access. you can laugh, that's fine. So we really want your input. So we want to, ideally, the ambition is to produce a much more usable web single front door for our schemes. We've got lots of schemes. We need to work on streamlining those schemes. At the same time, we also need to work on making it easier for you to access the right scheme at the right time. So we've worked with our comms colleagues, and there's an active sort of survey, very brief survey, to try to find out from you and from researchers, what are you looking for when you come to our website? How do you access our schemes? We know people don't have difficulty finding the right funding schemes. If you look at the numbers that came into KEUK Conference, but I'm sure we can make it easier with UKRI. So please, if you have a moment, 5 minutes, please do go to that, or you can just go to UKRI Commercialisation page or whatever, it's on LinkedIn as well. Please do spend a few minutes just to fill in and give us your feedback. So a couple more slides. One thing I wanted also to say is, as well as our assessment on commercialisation, Innovate have also been looking very much at the offer that Innovate UK make. There's a new CEO that's just started, so Tom has started a few weeks ago, and Innovate are also looking at their offer, and there's, you probably know, the launch of what they're calling the Growth Catalyst. We're having quite a lot of catalysts already, so I didn't get the right term. And that's a new way for Innovate to try and be more targeted for their support, more wraparound support for startups, spin-outs and SMEs. So that's a new pilot, and again, please do engage with that and see how that's going. Obviously, we're hearing around sort of looks around, changes around ICUR, linking up with investor partnerships. So there's lots happening in this space. And then the final couple of slides, impact acceleration accounts. So first of all, I love impact acceleration accounts. I think they're great, and the feedback is consistently good about that. This just gives you a bit of a summary for where we were at the last round. So slightly changed, as you know, we've got sort of harmonised impact acceleration accounts, and almost harmonised, we've got the ESRC impact acceleration accounts, which are aligned but slightly different time scale, which we were aware of. But for the harmonised, that just shows you the number of applications, the number of awards that were made in this round. As you know, we've extended them for another year. The reason we've done that is because we know there's lots of uncertainty in the system, and we can't make decisions until we get the spending review. We won't know the spending review until the autumn, and we didn't want you as organisations waiting. We know the downside to that is those organisations that either don't have IAs or wanted to increase IAs, we realise have to wait a bit longer, but you know, there's a balance there. Again, don't have to read all this, but you do give us lots of information about IAs, and just to say it's not wasted. We really use this, and actually I think the sort of outputs of IA is actually very impressive for the amount of funding. I think so. It's one of the reasons why we do use this information, and we've fed this absolutely into the spending review and use this as evidence base for the next round of IAs. So I'll stop there. We'll be over 10 minutes. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, so I think I should just state the obvious. We're going to give a short presentation about Research England, and then there's going to be the fireside. But we welcome questions on anything you hear today, and I'll put words in Tony's mouth and say Tony also welcomes questions. So do feel free to ask them. We'll introduce ourselves. We're doing a double act. So I'm the Associate Director of Knowledge Exchange, Strategic Projects and Partnerships at Research England. My name's Beth, for anyone who hasn't met me. I have been in Research England since October. Stuart very kindly put me on the stage at a KEUK Conference in my first week, so I'm sure some of you heard me bumble through what my aim of the job was. Before that, I have been a year at Scotland, at the Scottish Funding Council, as their Associate Director, one of three in O&I, and then in investment strategy for a long time, looking after infrastructure. So some of you will have come across me in kind of Horizon Europe Alternatives Planning, spending reviews, fiscal events, all those sorts of things. And a long time ago, I was a head of theme at NERC. So some of you may also have met me then. I'll pass to Ellen, and then we'll...
Hi everyone. Some of you may know I've stood up on this very stage for the last couple of years at this conference, so really pleased to be here again. My name is Ellen Bamford. I'm the Associate Director for Knowledge Exchange, Data and Evidence, so we sort of have a split portfolio to cover all the things that we do at Research England. In Knowledge Exchange, I've been in the team for 5-6 years now, and I would say that we've had quite a lot of change in our team at Research England this year, so there'll be a lot of new faces who you may not have seen before, but we're all really keen to meet you all and have conversations and sort of better understand what it is that everyone does within their institutions in the KEUK. So to say, we've had some changes, lots of new faces, so please do introduce yourself. I'm sure our team will do the same as well. Better going to kick us off today.
Yeah, if I can work. A buzzer, look at that. I should have put that slide up while we introduced ourselves, so you can all absorb it for a second. Okay, so we feel Research England has an important role in supporting, enabling and driving a strong and robust knowledge exchange system. And we think that role has three main strands, which you conveniently can see on our slide. So we allocate strategic institutional funding via formula and projects to help deliver systemic change. We do that through mechanisms such as HIFE and CCF Red, and you're going to hear us talk about both of those today. We have a role in understanding and driving forwards better data to capture the sector, and we use that to inform evidence-based approaches to funding and also our policy work. So some examples include our national KE metrics programme and KEF, which lots of you know are involved in. We take an ecosystem-wide lens and as a convener across different types of stakeholders to design and put initiatives in place, and also to fund national bodies for the wider benefit of the system, such as ENCA. And I know we've already said it, but we are really pleased to be here today, so please do talk to us at coffee. We're happy to answer any questions. We also have a KE policy at re.ukri.org mailbox. We're a small team, we promise it doesn't go into the abyss. So if you've ever got emails you want to ask us, do send them through. So, inevitably our work is shaped by our operating environment, and in the kind of near future and a bit beyond that, that includes policy priorities from this government, with an imminent industrial strategy about to be published, which, as Dame Nancy said, we expect to see universities having a key role, particularly in the context of the government's economic growth mission. Research England receives an annual guidance letter from the government, and that's our vehicle for the articulation of our priorities to guide our work for the next year. So the current letter clearly articulated that HIFE, for example, should be used to support that government priority of economic growth. And then, as Tony mentioned, we, alongside other councils in UKRI, are also updating our strategic delivery plans, and we are anticipating anticipating the multi-year spending review, which is next week. So we shall see what comes from that. I'll pass it Ellen.
Thank you. So to give a little bit of context then for what all of this means for our work at Research England, for our funding, and in particular what that means for HIFE, given that it is very important for a lot of people in this room. So as Beth mentioned, we expect updated and new government priorities, particularly with regards to the role of universities, to be articulated in the industrial strategy, and in particular our next annual guidance letter from DSIT, which is where they articulate government priorities, and then we can then think about how we then integrate that into our approach at Research England. So what we think this means specifically for HIFE is that we will be in a position to publish new policies and priorities for the HIFE programme in particular. Some of you may know this is a particular document that we publish periodically every 4 or 5 years, which sets out then for the next multi-year spend period for our programme what our priorities are for how HIFE should be used by institutions. And then this is what then enables institutions to then set your multi-year plans for how then you may use your HIFE allocations. Should you receive one, I realise that no one in this room is necessarily an English institution either. So we hope to be able to publish that priority document in the coming months, and then call for those, what we call accountability statements, multi-year plans later this year as well. So hopefully that's helpful in terms of thinking about your future and sort of planning direction. I should say that was predominantly on HIFE with regards to CCF Red. This programme has evolved significantly during this spending review period. We've run 3 calls, which Becca's going to talk about in a bit more detail shortly, in the last 18 months, and so we will reflect on the sort of future of that programme, priorities, what the shape and design may look like after the comprehensive spending review outcomes are announced. So, naturally, in the build-up to not just 1 but 2 phases of a spending review this year, a lot of our work has been focused on producing evidence of the value of both of those programmes in order to continue to articulate the value of what those programmes deliver and the activities that you will conduct on the ground as well. So we've produced, we're expert evaluators as well, 2 economic impact analysis this year, 1 for HIFE and 1 for CCF Red. And this slide here sort of gives a summary of some of those sort of really key evidence points that we've been able to pull out are particularly strong when inputting towards the spending review process that Tony talked through. Note that we are not just part of 2 spending review cases this year, but we are also at Research England for HIFE in particular. We do so for 2 government departments, as there's a £48 million contribution to HIFE from the Department for Education. So you'll note that within our materials this year, there's been a particular focus on producing evidence of how HIFE delivers against DFE priorities as well as DSITs. For instance, the value that student-led KE will bring. So that's been a particular focus for us. The third evaluation that I mentioned has been a far longer exercise over the last few years to really try and articulate how HIFE as a formula fund delivers some of this value that's on the screen behind me. And that's a particularly challenging process when you think about we allocate institutional allocations to yourselves to then spend in the most appropriate ways based on your strengths and strategies, etc. But then how do you then articulate how you get that to the ultimate impact, noting that there's often quite long and diverse pathways to get to that point. So that's been a particularly challenging process. I do want to highlight that although we've worked with external evaluators on producing these bits of evidence, actually what's really fundamental to this are the materials that you'll provide to us, whether that be through your annual monitoring statements for HIFE, which really is the underpinning to be able to produce that ROI figure that is so important when we talk to Treasury. Or an attribution survey that many of you completed last year, or if many of you may have taken part in case study interviews with our evaluators over the last year or so. So just to say that we not only really appreciate that, but it really is fundamental to having robust, meaningful analysis to continue to be able to advocate for the value of the programmes that we operate. I won't talk to this slide in huge detail, but we did want to note, moving sort of beyond funding in the last year, a particular focus for us has been delivering the recommendations of the Independent Spending Review, and wanted to use this point now to kind of reflect on sort of progress that we feel that our work has made at Research England, but also the progress that you all as institutions and the rapid work that many of you have done to respond to those recommendations, whether it be to reflect on reviewing best practice policies or returning new data, with regards to a spin-out register that I'll talk about in a moment, or submitting applications to our shared TTO pilot. So, another key area of our work in the last year has been in our National Metrics Programme, noting developing metrics is absolutely integral to what we do at Research England, and our kind of flagship activity has been development of a spin-out register, the publication of which is being led by HESA tomorrow, really excitingly, slightly nervously for me, and also with our partners at UKRI as well, providing their expert advice in that design too. We are really, really excited about this, not just for us, but for all potential users of this new data set. The register will be the first and only official list of all spin-out companies produced by UK universities. That in itself, it will be a hugely important asset. We think that to have really robust conversations on a topic, you need to have evidence-based understanding of that topic, and the register will provide that. It's a transparent list of data for all to use, regardless of intended purpose, area of interest, etc. So this will definitely be an influential data set for us to try and incorporate into our funding approaches in the long term, but also we want it to be a resource for all. And this is something that we think is first of its kind internationally, and therefore builds on that kind of international leading underpinning that HEPSI has as a unique and internationally leading data set in knowledge exchange. I won't talk to any more detail on the registers, we're still out of time. If you have any questions at all, please come and talk to myself or colleagues at HESA afterwards. So just to set this in a little bit of context, a key part of our approach, as Beth mentioned, is thinking about measurement. Our metrics programme fits within that, where we see ourselves really sort of driving innovation in measuring knowledge exchange, whether that be innovating new national data, firstly through the spin-outs register, but we also have ambitions in improving data on knowledge exchange in your locality or in that as a regional element, but also thinking about innovative ways of then presenting that data, because to some extent, what is the use of data if you can't present it in useful and interesting ways that gives you meaningful insights about what it is that you will do on the ground. So in recent years, we've developed the knowledge exchange framework. We're thinking about how we could use the spin-out register to produce some kind of dashboard to comment on the national health of the spin-out ecosystem, and that then links into wider work that we do at Research England, for instance, on analysis of national data sets like HEPSI, and we'll be producing our annual report on this in the coming months and driving forwards more innovative ways that we can present data through that means as well. I'll pass back to Beth.
So we just have a couple more slides. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about CCF on our lovely timeline. So we launched CCF back in 2017 and invested £111 million across 18 projects that ran until 2023. We saw a near 8 times return on investment with that, and Ellen showed a slide slightly earlier, but we had £855 million fund leverage, nearly 13,000 people trained, 214 new spin-outs, 338 new products and services launched. And I should say thank you to Wellspring, who did the hard work of working out what the impact of CCF was, so thank you. And then we received further funding in the last spending review to continue that programme. We called it CCF Red. So under CCF Red, we've launched 3 calls. In December 2023, we announced nearly 19 million to support 14 short-term projects, which were kind of pump priming the university sector. They run for 1 to 2 years, so they're still live. In November 2024, we announced nearly 5 million across 13 projects for 6-month shared TTO pilot, which I know many of you in the room are involved in. And that was about seeking and developing a wide range of diverse models across HEPs, higher education partners, and wider partners to share the functions that are provided by TTOs. And lots of those projects and colleagues involved in them are presenting at the conference, so I'm sure some of you have been to their sessions. Then last month we announced 30 million for 4 projects across the next 3 to 5 years in our University Commercialisation Ecosystems call. So this is very much about supporting the strategic development of emerging and maturing place-based commercialisation ecosystems with a focus to share commercialisation best practices through the collaboration between higher education providers and the wider ecosystem partners. And I didn't tee him up, but David yesterday in his keynote very kindly talked about Forging Ahead, which is one of those awards up in the Midlands. So thinking about where next for CCF Red. So CCF Red was the new programme for the last spending review period, and it had those 3 funding opportunities we talked about. We're now at a stage where we're considering what's next, what the future opportunities should be within the programme, and we're basing that on the learnings from the current projects. It is of course influenced by the spending review outcomes, and then obviously, as Tony talked about, the quite complex process internally, including our own Research England decisions. But what I can say it will entail is that we'll support those ecosystem projects as they begin to kick off their activities. The short-term core projects, those ones running for 1 to 2 years, will start to hand in their final monitoring returns this year and next, and we'll start to review their findings. And the shared TTO projects came to an end in April, and we are running an evaluation exercise over the coming months, which will include a workshop to gather and share those learnings. So we'll take all of that forward. And I suppose the last slide we wanted to show today is about our principles and our values. So we talk a lot about what we do, we talk a lot about the operating environment we work in and how that shapes our work and how we kind of, like any organisation, pushed and pulled in different directions and the pressures I'm sure we're all under. But everything we do is fundamentally underpinned by our principles and values. Everything we do is about recognising universities as kick-starting that economic growth, driving a range of university business activities, deepening the KE data and evidence available for funding and robust decisions, and the importance of engaging with institutions. So just a reiteration that we are here, loads of our team are here, you'll see them, please do come and say hello to us. But also we're always available, please do feel like you can get in touch with us, we're not in a corner somewhere, we are very keen to be visible, very keen to work with you. And with that we'll hand over to our new director, and Stuart, who are going to do a quick fireside, and then there's a Q&A.
Simon, do you consent? I think I talked about the diversity of membership, and I think it's really useful to understand different people's perspectives in the world they're working in. So it's really useful to have funders on the stage who are able to explain a little bit about the context they're working in, even if you're not receiving funding from those organisations. Hopefully you've picked up some of the context and the narrative and the stories and cases they have to make, and that will be helpful regardless of the source of funding. And apparently I have a reputation of throwing people on stage to be introduced to people within their first few weeks. Now, Simon's got off lightly in that this is now your
week 5.
Week 5.
So, yeah.
So Simon's got off slightly lightly with that. But what we do is heavily dependent on people. And I hope throughout the conference you've had a chance to meet and get to know people. And actually it's a really good opportunity to get to know Simon. Many of you will know him, but having taken on a new role in the last year or two as well, how you sort of function and work in this role is interesting to understand what your drivers and motivations are and sort of reintroduce you in that role. So I'm just going to ask Simon a few questions which hopefully sort of talk a little bit about his career and what he hopes to achieve. And as the team said, we can take Q&A at the end. and we can navigate that as to who the most appropriate person to respond is. I should also say it's very great that the team talked today. As was mentioned, we're in interesting decision-making times for government, and so I've given Simon a pass that if there is a question that he is not able to answer, it's entirely legitimate for him to go, actually, come back to me on that. And I'm sure you'll understand why that's really important to be able to do. So, Simon, I thought it would be worthwhile starting off just asking you about what you did before becoming the Director of Knowledge Exchange at Research England. So could you give us a sort of potted career history? Ideally not starting from birth or school, but wherever you like, sort of.
So, 2 large chunks of work, essentially. So 16 years at Imperial College London, working on quite a few different aspects of knowledge exchange. So I arrived at Imperial actually working on industry partnerships for the Faculty of Engineering. And prior to that, I had worked as an engineer for 15 years. So I was a graduate hired by Ford Motor Company, and then spun out into a company called Visteon that does all of the electronics for cars. So if you have driven a Ford Focus or a Ford Mondeo or a Renault Megane from about 15 years ago, you may well have experienced parts that I had a role in designing or making. Years ago, not quite birth, but years ago, I did a DPhil at Oxford in neural networks. This was in 1991 when we were in, I think it was the second wave of AI at the time. It then had a quiet period and is quite popular now. That's a brief summary of what I did.
Well, I have to say, what I love, so David Coleman's talk yesterday, I'm a bit of a tech geek, an engineer too, and I love the kind of seeing the output of those work in action. And I'm sure a lot of you in this room get a lot of pleasure from the projects that you've worked on and how they've had a real impact in the real world. I mean, that's quite a diverse sort of range of experience from big industry into universities. How do you find that shift, into sort of, your role in Imperial?
So it was, I think arriving at Imperial, it was probably the biggest change in terms of my career steps. And I've done various over the years. So within my automotive role, I spent 3 years working in Portugal, so that was quite also a big culture difference between, say, the UK, the US, and Portugal. But arriving at university was certainly the biggest difference in trying to navigate something that really was not at all joined up. So a corporate world has quite a clear sort of hierarchy from the top down. You kind of know where you are. Working in the university was certainly not that. So there was a lot of having to understand and build networks and contacts across many different parts of the university and gradually make sense of it. And over my 16 years there, I had quite a few responsibilities along the way and built up an enterprise function that covered industry partnerships, tech transfer, student entrepreneurship, incubation out of White City, consultancy, major projects. And so we were a team of about 140 people when I left, which is large, and I know not everybody has that kind of resource, but also the expectations of the output and the activity were also large. So I think it was a suitable size for the role.
And I remember when I started in tech transfer, the sort of language was described about needing to be bilingual between different worlds and understanding different cultures. And what's fascinating there is being multilingual, so having lived and worked in industry and universities and now in a sort of policy environment. And what gets you up in the morning in terms of that's quite a varied career, but what's the motivation? I think we've had a bit of a snippet of that, but actually, why are you still working in this space? What was it that drives you? What's your motivation?
I mean, it's pretty exciting, isn't it? So you're working with some of the brightest minds on the planet in our UK universities. They tend to be pretty humble in nature, so you're looking at these amazing people who are doing really cool stuff, and actually maybe they're not fully capable of translating that into real-world impact. And so what a role to do to be able to sit there and be able to help them to achieve that and to actually create some scale of impact from their work. So that's a pretty cool thing to get out of bed for.
So we've got to keep you close to the kind of real impact.
Oh, don't worry. Yeah.
And then, what do you see? So you now have this sort of sector-wide role. So you've worked in industry, worked in universities, worked with 10U, which was a sort of a little bit of thinking about the impact on the sector. What have you taken from those, and what do you think is the biggest developments that you've seen over the KE through that time that you've sort of seen evolve through those kind of stages of your career?
Yeah, so I think a lot has happened certainly over 16 years. So I remember my first practice conference, which was the previous name to KEUK, which was in Dublin.
We're still in the grace period. I found myself saying practice today. And actually in Dublin, we were in a stadium as well, I think.
We were indeed, yes.
We were back to a stadium.
A few faces here that were in Dublin too, so maybe not too many. I would say, I think, a lot of change in that time, and perhaps also, I guess I look at it through the lens of Imperial. I know there's only one university, I know there's a huge diversity, but that is my lens. And certainly for us, the growth of student entrepreneurship as a thing was a massive change for us, and it's something we were deliberate about. So we started on a 10-year journey to go from nowhere on student entrepreneurship to, I think, pretty good level now. So Enterprise Lab in the FT rankings, I think it was 25th in Europe now in terms of an entrepreneurship facility in its own right, which I think is quite an achievement. And about 2,000 students a year engaging in entrepreneurship at Imperial to either progress an idea that they have, whether they're going to be an innovator in a large organisation or in a small company as a founder. So I think that's a huge change. I think also, this community of people, right, is a massive change. The level of professionalism in terms of taking knowledge exchange forward, and the work that's gone on to facilitate that, all the work around the different tools that have been put together. You're seeing it all the time, the work of Set Squared and the tools they've just brought out, University of Edinburgh and their innovation competency framework earlier in the month, the USIC guides a couple of years ago. So all the time we're sort of characterising and teasing apart the different aspects of what we do, and so that raises everybody's game. So I think it's a super exciting time in terms of just how we can take that further. And events like this are really key. So we have to build confidence and capability across the community. Great to see the level of stage here. This is not a tin pot event. This is, I think, what this community and this professional sector needs. So congratulations to you and the team for giving the stage at the moment.
Thank you. I think one of the things we were talking about yesterday, I know you were busy around, was actually the state of how the system in the UK is maturing and developing. And I found over the last year, talking to colleagues around the world, how they're looking for some of the developments. I was asked to give a talk on the spin-out review and the different aspects of it, and talking to other nation states and saying that the breadth of the different aspects that were considered, it wasn't just about equity, it was about training, it was about visibility of data, it was about engagement and mobility. And then you look back on how the system has responded. So we mentioned the spin-out register being published tomorrow, which is foreseen and part of that review. You look at the shared TTO programs that we talked a lot about yesterday and those sessions, the sort of system response. And what I often say to my colleagues is the relationship between the funders and the professionals in the UK is quite special in terms of that dialogue. And I'm well aware that the conversation about proof of concept funding and the way that we are able to engage with funders and help finesse how those schemes work. When they're at pilot stage, and pilots always will get sort of refined, but actually those conversations early on are really, really important about getting that sort of system working. And actually how we can be proud of that as a system and put on the screen the world's first spin-out register, which is no small feat. And actually that we have data collection, which is mandatory. Our American colleagues are very proud of their voluntary data collection, whereas we have a long and comprehensive data set which enables that informed decision. So I'm now going off and around. There was another question I was going to ask you, which isn't fair to ask you up front, but I think one that has kind of come up in the discussions I've had, is the relationship between student enterprise and spin-outs. And I think that's something that will be great to unpack over the coming months about how those two relate. So lots of developments that you see, but we're in challenging times. So we also heard from Nancy Rothwell yesterday about it's a challenging economic environment, geopolitical environment. So looking ahead, and we won't hold you to these, because the world is changeable, and the one thing we know about predicting the future is it's usually wrong in some respect. But what challenges do you foresee that you think we're going to have to respond to in knowledge exchange over the coming years?
So it's always, I was speaking to Adam earlier as well, it's always a challenging time. I've never known a time when it's not been challenging in this particular sector. So yeah, I think we have a different flavour of challenge ahead of us right now. And key to that for sure is financial sustainability. So well, first of all, it's great to see so many of you here. I think that was a real question mark about just what was affordable in these times. I think at the same time, science and research is fractalising, so it gets ever more complex every day, and yet we are, as a community, tasked with providing expert advice across so many different types of activities, so much complexity, and each university has got hundreds of different experts across so many different fields. So yeah, that's a huge challenge about just how do we stay abreast of that as a community to be useful to those researchers. But I think there are opportunities too, and I talked a little bit about AI. I was at an event in Catalonia yesterday, a similar event for the universities there, and they are doing some pretty cool stuff around using AI in their offices around partnering between technologies and external agents, and also just thinking about how novel is a discovery that's come across. So when it comes to sort of thinking about suitability for patenting and commercialisation. So use of AI tools, I think, is something that can, again, raise everybody's game. I think it's something that we have to be at the races with. I think it will come naturally. So yeah, I think there's a massive opportunity around that to make us more productive and to enable us to deliver a better service to our community. I think there is another challenge, which is we're pretty bad at telling our story, generally. So if you go out of this room and have a conversation with a member of the public and they ask you, what do you do? I think most will have a hard time actually explaining that and landing it. So I think we've got to get far better at telling our story as a profession. And that starts with back home at your university and what your universities say about this kind of work. But also collectively as a group, I think we've got to simplify our messages. And we're all thinking about future funding from government and so on. That, to some extent, depends on how well we tell our story, so that we make it clear how important Hive is to what we do. And we don't see that very often. We don't see Hive sort of celebrated and publicised. So if I go into my local park where something has been just put in place, there's a little sign at the bottom that says funded by the National Lottery. You don't see anywhere in your universities funded by Hive as a tagline. That's kind of like an easy win about how we could raise the game and say, okay, Hive is super important. We saw the 10x return. We've got to talk about it more so that anybody in politics knows about it, the general public knows about it. So how we tell our story and celebrate is a way of helping ourselves to unlock the funding that we all want.
If you want Simon to feel warm and cosy when he walks into your event, if you've got crediting the funders on your slides, that would help. And if we get into the habit of that more, in terms of crediting where the funding comes, that partnership between funders and the universities, I think will really help to tell those stories. And that storytelling is interesting, both storytelling to government but storytelling to the public, and how we're better at telling those stories. I've got a last question, which hopefully is a helpful one, which is essentially what you want the community to go away thinking, but what do you hope to enable in your time as Director of Knowledge Exchange? What do you hope to enable in that time? What's your vision, if you like? What's your...
Yeah, so I took the role to build confidence and capability. That was my pitch at my interview, and that's what I want to be here to do. And that covers a variety of things. I think the telling, if there's one thing that in however many years' time I look back on, if we can come away and I can see that we have told our story better, that for me would be a huge win overall. So, but there's a lot to do as a sector. I like the title of mission driven. So I think as universities we are heading to becoming more of mission-driven organisations. There's a big expectation from government now. I think you heard it yesterday from Nancy around the linkage of universities to economic growth. That's huge, actually. That's a massive expectation to place on organisations that traditionally are doing research and teaching. So how do we build out from research and teaching to actually be good at delivering economic growth, and what does that mean? A huge expectation around place agenda and how universities build out these regional innovation ecosystems. That's not easy. Will we see tools and best practice come to the fore on how we do that? There's a lot of challenge, but a lot of reason to be cheerful about this as well, and not least again the community, the expertise of all of you in the room here. That's a pretty cool team to go out to bat with to achieve economic growth for the country.
I'm sure we all want to support you in building that confidence and capability and telling those stories and having that impact. Back to that sort of comment about when you drive a car, it might have had some impact from some academic and some input that you've had in. Is driving that impact into the real world that sort of makes a difference to people. I'm sure we're all on board in terms of trying to make more difference in the world through those economically and socially. So I'm sure we'll be with you on that. We now have time for questions from the floor. You can ask Simon questions or you can ask the team questions. So the usual rules apply. What I would suggest is that the team come up and sit on the chairs. I'll stand up. Simon can stay nice and comfortable there. And if you've got a question, put your hand up and a microphone will appear to you and be handed to you. And if you can sort of say your name and organisation, that would be really helpful. Don't be shy and do sort of follow up on any of those sort of points. Oh.
Thank you. Andrew Ray, University of Bristol. One of the biggest factors that we can use to achieve economic growth is collaborative R&D with industry. Over the past day or so, we've heard a lot about commercialisation and setting up new ventures. We haven't heard so much about collaborating with existing large companies. Could the panel say something about what the UKRI agencies will do to support that and grow that?
So, do you want to nominate your answer? It's like a game show.
We want to show off our technical expertise. We can't get the mic on. So, if it's not our own mic, I think Tony will have something to say. But maybe we go to your own mic at the moment.
I think one's coming forward now. Was that you wanting to answer that?
We want you to
Thank you. I'll start. So, yeah, you're absolutely right. The importance of collaborative R&D is key. And it's pretty baked into everything that all the councils and all UKRI does. So I think it is really important, and it's a really important way of promoting knowledge exchange as well as the direct benefits. So, I mean, I think it is, if you look at all the things that we do, so if you look at EPSRC, for example, we've got specific initiatives to support collaborative R&D, as does all the other councils, and Innovate. So it is very much key, and you're right, we don't talk about it as such, but I guess you get better at understanding what the benefits are. But there are direct returns from collaborative R&D in terms of economic impact, knowledge exchange, etc. So I agree it's key. It is baked in. I think again, it'd be interesting to see how that features part of our new strategy.
I think also we've got a session later, which is thinking specifically about business collaboration, where I think that would be one to look at and engage in that conversation and pick up on that. Any questions from the floor? Again, the joy of lights means I can't quite see, but do put your hand up and a microphone will come to you. You've got one over there, got one at the front, not the lights, but we'll go there and then to the front. Again, just say who you are and where you come from, and that will just be really helpful.
Hello, Hannah Williams from the University of Exeter. I think we've heard so much over the last couple of days about the value of economic growth, and obviously that's a massive government driver. But what we do is so much more than money. So what other metrics are you using to be able to show the value of what we do?
I would say that is actually our biggest challenge. So at the moment, as I'm sure many people in this room are aware, the metrics that we use when thinking about, I guess I'll take funding in particular as a sort of separate category to thinking about the system as a whole and being able to evidence the system in that kind of way. At the moment, we predominantly have income measures only really as a robust way of comparably measuring the activity, the cases that people do across the sector and taking that into our funding mechanism. So I would say that is a huge challenge, and that has been something that at this conference over a number of years we do continue to talk about. I know KEUK practice have run sessions previously as well, trying to think about what are ways that we can better measure not just the economic but the social impact of the activities that you all do. Money is only ever part of the picture. Sometimes it is not part of the picture at all, and that's something that we want to better articulate and drive as well. At the moment we realise that through our mechanisms, Hive in particular incentivises activities that result in income, and actually we also recognise the value of wider than that. So I do think that I don't have an obvious answer to that, but I think agree and are supportive that if we could, there would be a broader range that we would be using, and that's where I guess part of our metrics programme comes in. No, as we've mentioned, our focus so far has been on spin-outs as that first sort of focus area, and that's where I guess on that particular topic, the register we hope will enable not just use licensing income as a way of measuring that particular activity, but trying to think about broader measures for that area in particular. So yes, I agree. We're taking small steps along the way. We've looked at one area in particular, local, regional KE is something we want to look at next. Supporting them is really hard.
Hard but working. The gentleman at the front.
Phil Clare, Queen Mary Innovation. So Knowledge Exchange UK and its predecessors have for more than 2 decades been at the heart of the conversation between funders and institutions and people across the whole Knowledge Exchange community. So for UKRI, what would you like Knowledge Exchange UK to be delivering for your goals over the next few years, and what are your proposals for supporting this key organisation?
It wasn't a planned question, is it?
No.
He is my old boss. But yeah.
I forgot that the traditional precursor to the question that David Seckle was used was, given that UK Technology Transfer and Knowledge Exchange is the envy of the world, then. So.
I'll say a few words given Simon's very new in role, and then I think we'll pass to Simon. So for us, this sector is hugely diverse. It's incredibly complex. It's complex if you work in it, let alone trying to explain that to new ministers, to new governments, to new civil servants. And we talk a little bit about the data we use for funding, but we do an enormous amount of work about articulating the value of all of knowledge exchange that we support and the value of a very diverse sector. However, it's actually incredibly difficult to get all of those institutions in a room and ask you all what's the biggest challenge at the moment, or what's the thing we should be aware of as a funding agency. So for us, and I guess I'll put words in everyone's mouth, for us the value is having an organisation that is able to kind of very quickly canvass members when we have rapid turnaround questions. And some of you will have experienced that in spending review. We get rapid fire questions on our narratives. It's very helpful. But also taking that longer term strategic view. What is it that universities themselves want to be achieving in this space? What is it that they feel is the market failure that public funding should be addressing? And where does that then become UKRI's role? And then a kind of dialogue about how can we get there together. We saw it with proof of concept. Hopefully you feel it with Research England and what we do in CCF Red and what we do in Hive. But for us, it's that short-term rapid help and a very long-term strategic understanding of the landscape. And we try to be as visible as possible. But I mean, Stuart runs an entire organisation doing that. We cannot do it as a team of 5. So it is enormously helpful. But Simon, 3 weeks in, I guess.
So a few things. So building confidence and capability requires a profession that is recognised. And we have a conversation about this, but I don't think we have sufficient recognition of the knowledge exchange practitioner profession. I think more can be done around that. I don't know what that looks like in this day and age, whether some form of chartership is appropriate for that. Great training provision from KEUK already, but is there something more we can do to actually recognise this as a profession and a needed one, and to give it the sort of credibility, credence that it deserves. There is another organisation in Europe called ASTP that has something called RTTP, but that is for a subsection of knowledge exchange, so actually is there something more broader than that we can be realised? The other challenge I think we face is we cannot do this alone as universities, so there has to be joining up and collaboration across universities, investors, philanthropists, charities, large industry players. And could we see KEUK as one of the enablers to bring together more of the different partners, the different stakeholders that we need for success, whether it is achieving economic growth or social impact? That collaboration across different stakeholders is key. And there aren't many organisations that really draw that together these days. So is there an opportunity for KEUK to play in that sort of multi-stakeholder? And I know there are multiple stakeholders in the room, but there's more that could be done.
On that note, not planned, I think I'm going to draw stumps. There's a whole series of cricket puns being threaded throughout the conference. I can see the opportunity to talk into that skills topic, and I'm going to resist. We are working on a skills framework, as you saw from the thing. We're talking to ATTP, the international collaboration that organised the RTTP. We're thinking about accreditation. We're talking to Simon. So that's a conversation we can pick up with the team and think more about that. I think we're all aligned in that wanting the profession to be better understood, better appreciated, and perceived as much more confident and capable. And I'm sure that over the coming months we'll all be working together in a variety of formats to do that. We're moving on to a coffee break, so I'm going to ask you to give a round of applause to the speakers. Very grateful for the given time.